On today, we ask that you would consider Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. 9 years ago today, Fred Shuttlesworth, an iconic civil rights leader, died. His death may have been overshadowed for perhaps two reasons. Number one, it is the same day that Steve Jobs, who created Apple Computer, died on the same day. And the appeal that Steve Jobs has had in the world certainly would make his death monumental. It could also be that when we think of civil rights, we are accustomed to thinking of what we may consider the main characters, such as a Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks. But the civil rights movement was aided by many great individuals, and Fred Shuttlesworth happens to be one. As a matter of fact, he is considered to have been one of the big three, as they called it, in the civil rights era. He died at the age of 89, although he thought he would not live to be 40 or so, given the tumultuous South that he lived in and the racial tensions he experienced. He would go on to become a pastor of a church. He was a co-founder with Martin Luther King and others of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He urged King often to be a participant in the civil rights movement and would sometimes jokingly and even seriously say that you have to do more than give flowery speeches. He was the membership chair of the NAACP Alabama chapter, and he also helped to start the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. What is interesting about Fred Shuttlesworth is that he participated in freedom rides and he did the sit-ins at the lunch counters. He refused to leave his house after someone placed dynamite under his window and did serious damage to his home. On one occasion, after trying to enroll his children in a non-integrated school, he was beat with chains and baseball bats and brass knuckles, and his wife was stabbed, thankfully not killed. Even after such a severe beating, he turned to his children and said, "We must learn to forgive." He was known to be a very courageous and, in fact, tenacious person. He's quoted as saying, "I will kill segregation or be killed by it." Historians and contemporaries of his often look at Fred Shuttlesworth as having been very brave and very courageous in the advancement of the civil rights agenda. It is for this reason that we call you to Nehemiah chapter 6 to see another person who developed a very courageous spirit, and that is the person of Nehemiah and trying to help the people as they were rebuilding the walls and gates of Jerusalem. The Bible says, "Now it came to pass when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian and the rest of our enemies heard that I had builded the wall, that there was no breach left therein, though at that time I had not set up the doors upon the gates, that Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, Come, let us meet together in some one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me mischief. And I sent messengers unto them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease, whilst I leave it and come down to you?" Here's an important thing that we must understand in times in which we need to display courage and be people of conviction. Not everyone has our best interests at heart. We have people who are certainly enemies. There are jealous people who are insecure. There are envious people who feel inferior. And there are people who do not like your light shining because it exposes the fact that they live in darkness. At times, we find ourselves discouraged by these people, and sometimes the great work that we're doing stops. These people may come in the form of co-workers. They can even be family, so-called friends, and believe it or not, even church members. In order to have a spirit like Nehemiah, like a Fred Shuttlesworth of courage, we must have a conviction, that is a belief or a resolve, that we're going to focus on our goals and that we're not going to stop until we've accomplished what God has set us here to do. We must be sober. We must have a vigilance, because our devil does not look like a stereotypical Hollywood image. He disguises himself and even works through people to bring about the seed of discouragement. Like Nehemiah, who refused to go to the plain of Ono, we must make sure that we stay in a good place. When we say place, that does not necessarily have to be geographic. It can reference a place mentally and emotionally and certainly spiritually. Be careful that you do not allow your enemies to draw you to a bad place so that you're operating on their grounds. Stay where you are, stay connected to God, and stay focused on your goals and your vision. Be a person of courage, that even when others try to discourage you, that you're going to have the resolve that your enemies, jealous people, envious people, or those who live in the dark will not keep you from being what God would have for you to be. Each of you should understand that you are great in the eyesight of God, not because of any reasons to promote any sense of arrogance, but you are great because God has deemed you to be his children and has given to each of you a mission that is unique to your own life. Others will try to discourage you as they are influenced by Satan, but always recognize the need to continue pursuing what God has for you, so that when you stand before him, he can say, "Well done." Have the determination of a Nehemiah that you cannot come down, and have the mindset of Fred Shuttlesworth that even when people wrong you, you will not be overcome with bitterness, but you will forgive. God is writing your history or recording your history, just as the history of Fred Shuttlesworth has been written, the history of Nehemiah has been written. Make sure that when your history story is read and you stand before him, you can boldly and proudly say that you did not let Satan get the victory. You did what God called you to do because you are a person of courage and conviction. This has been another edition of A Few Minutes with the Minister. We hope that you have found this encouraging, as we all need courage in conviction in times like these.